Can I just lastly, Chairman, understand, on your £1.5 million a week that you're spending on, I think you called it
repair and maintain.
Yeah. Does that include these wretched gates and everything else that have gone in? Is that all included, or is that on top?
It includes the works to the palace itself. Yes. So
the gates you put on the outside too. I mean, who signed all that off?
So the accountable officers in the houses are the Clerk of the House and the Clerk of the Parliament. They are the accountable officers and the corporate officers.
That must have cost lots of tens of millions to do all these wretched gates that hold me up coming out of Parliament now. I mean, who actually signed off on that?
4 million to be precise.
Sorry?
64 million.
I know, Geoffrey, but if you take 1.5 million a week, by the sort of crude maths that I employ, that's £75 million. What did it cost, Geoffrey? 46 million. So there's a large slug of it. That's included.
The figure 1.5 million is a live figure and changes depending on the portfolio of works undertaken by the parliamentary estate.
It includes the wretched gates to keep the public out.
As far as I understand, it includes all works of the palace, which we would include.
All of that, I'm afraid, is arbitrary spend. It's not necessary, is it?
Yeah. Those particular works came under the security programme that was designed to make sure that members of both houses can continue to be safe and secure operating on this site.
When I talk to both members of both houses, they tell me nobody was consulted about it. So this committee made the decision to do it. But I mean, most MPs had no idea, and most of the Lords had no idea it was happening.
So business cases are obviously, Treasury compliant business cases are produced for all parliamentary programmes and would include this one, Restoration Renewal. The one you're talking about is the security programme. That went through the normal business case process. It was approved by the accounting officers and the corporate officers, so the two clerks, depending in which part of the building it was on. And as part of that, those projects have engagement with the domestic committees, so the administration committee and the finance committee as normal. Restoration Renewal has a separate governance structure, but I think, Chair, you probably want to cover that in different questions.
It's in that 1.5 million a week, you're saying?
As far as I understand it, those costs are included in those £1.5 million a week.
Point of clarification, the gates cost 64 million.
Rupert Lowe did not walk into this exchange calmly. He walked straight into a financial firestorm that exposes one of the most controversial security upgrades in Parliament's recent history. What started as a routine questioning over £1.5 million a week in refurbishment spending quickly escalated into something far more explosive. Lowe didn't just question the numbers, he dismantled them live, breaking down the weekly figure into a staggering £75 million projection, forcing officials to correct and clarify their own statements in real time. But the real turning point came when he zeroed in on one thing: the wretched gates placed outside Parliament. These gates, described as part of a wider security programme, were defended as necessary infrastructure to protect members of both houses. But Lowe wasn't convinced. He pressed harder who signed it off, why MPs weren't properly consulted, and whether this was genuinely security or simply uncontrolled spending under a different label. Officials insisted the project followed normal business case procedures, approved by accounting and corporate officers, and embedded within restoration and renewal governance structures. But that explanation only intensified the tension. Because the key issue wasn't just procedure, it was perception. To Lowe, this wasn't governance. This was unaccountable spending dressed up as security policy, with no meaningful consultation from the very MPs it directly affects. He framed it as arbitrary, unnecessary, and disconnected from public interest, especially when those security gates are physically restricting access to Parliament itself. And then came the most striking clarification of all. The gates alone reportedly cost around £64 million. That single figure reframed the entire exchange. What was presented as routine maintenance and security suddenly looked like a massive, opaque expenditure project with limited transparency and growing political sensitivity. In the end, Lowe's argument wasn't just about cost, it was about trust. Who decides what gets built? Who gets consulted? And whether security is being used as a justification for spending decisions that the public and even MPs never fully approved. And that question is exactly what turned this exchange from a budget discussion into a full-scale political confrontation. The exchange didn't end with clarification, it escalated into deeper political tension about control, transparency, and who actually holds authority over Parliament's transformation. Lowe continued pushing the idea that decisions of this scale cannot simply be buried inside internal security programs and approved through layers of administrative officers without real democratic scrutiny. Officials repeatedly leaned on governance language, accountable officers, business cases, normal approval processes, but that only reinforced Lowe's central criticism, that the system is designed in a way where responsibility becomes diffused, making it almost impossible to pinpoint who truly signed off on massive spending decisions. The £64 million gates became more than just infrastructure in the debate, they became symbolic. For Lowe, they represented a physical and political barrier, not just keeping threats out, but potentially keeping the public at a distance from their own institution. That framing shifted the tone from budgeting concern to constitutional discomfort. As the numbers were confirmed and reconfirmed, £1.5 million weekly spend, tens of millions in security works, and the final clarification on gate costs, the scale of expenditure overshadowed every procedural explanation offered. What remained unresolved in the exchange was not just how much, but why this way, and why without wider consultation. That unanswered tension is what gave the moment its impact, turning a technical committee hearing into a highly charged confrontation over accountability, transparency, and trust in parliamentary decision-making.